Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the Growth Philosophy Podcast. Today, let's talk about the current lockdown that's being fueled by the coronavirus. Now, I've been thinking about this and reading about this quite a lot, and I've come to the realization that continuing with the lockdown or prolonging the lockdown is actually ultimately bad. I have three big reasons for this. So, if you're listening to this podcast, you're very likely somewhere where things are in a lockdown. Like most people around the world. Like most countries have implemented some form of quarantine and lockdown measures, which means people can't really go out of their houses. I've seen firsthand the empty streets, the closed shops, and the practice of social distancing in grocery stores and pharmacies. Now, while the lockdown has proven useful, and it seems to be working, there are causes for concern. A recent conversation with a pregnant friend of mine in Scotland, who was being denied the usual pre-birth checks, made me consider the potential drawbacks of this lockdown measure. So while there are merits, there are reasons to think that continuing the lockdown is actually not such a good idea. So since that conversation of mine with my friend, I've actually done quite a bit of research on the topic. I've gone through quite a lot of research journals and articles to understand the pros and cons of the lockdown. And from everything that I've learned, here is what's become clear to me. Prolonging the coronavirus lockdown is a bad idea. So let me tell you why I believe this is a bad idea. So there are three main reasons. Number one, the economic costs. Number two, the health costs. And number three, the social costs. What about the economic costs? So the lockdown has already seen many small businesses go out of business. It's not that they've hit pause and will come back after the coronavirus situation normalizes. No. They're gone forever. That's it. It's done for them. They're gone because they just could not exist without the lack of business. And then there is a number of people who have been unemployed. When businesses cease to exist, their employees cease to have jobs. It's really simple math. There is no business, there is no job. Now, you might argue that governments are providing financial help, like the $1 trillion stimulus package that the USA sanctioned, the multi-billion pound fiscal stimulus that the UK government offered, or the similar stimulus packages that other countries around the world are offering to their citizens and businesses. Yes, it is great. I laud them for their efforts. They're doing a great job. Governments around the world have really stepped up, and they are really trying to help their businesses and their citizens. It will certainly help, those stimuluses, but here is my concern. How long can the governments continue with this stimulus? I was recently reading a piece about how businesses in the Philippines, for example, have already asked for another 280 billion pesos, which is $5.52 billion of fiscal stimulus. This is after the fiscal stimulus that they have already received. Very likely the same will be the case in other countries as well, if it isn't already. The longer the lockdown continues, the more funding and help businesses will need to stay afloat. It's really simple. The longer the lockdown continues, the longer they will need that help. And here is another factor to consider. According to research from the Imperial College of London, it will take 18 months of the current level of quarantine and social distancing practices for this approach, for this lockdown to be truly effective. No government in the world has the sort of funds necessary to feed all their citizens for 18 months while putting the whole economy on lockdown. It's just not impractical, it's actually unfeasible. Now, let's put this simply. No business means no salary, which means no tax revenue, which means governments have no income. Most governments around the world are in debt already. So how exactly do you think they can realistically keep funding the economy for the long term? So that's the economic cost, or at least that scratches the surface of the economic cost. Now let's consider the health costs. Now, if history is a predictor, which it often is, the large-scale unemployment that's resulting from this lockdown will cause a massive amount of health problems, both physical and psychological. This is what happened during the last recession, which cut short collective life expectancy, caused a huge spike in mental health issues like depression and stress, and also significantly increased the rate of suicide. According to a recent research I read, there were 10,000 more suicides than normal in just Europe and USA alone during that recession. And this time around, economists are actually predicting an even bigger recession. A recession that will only get worse the longer economies are in a state of lockdown. And then there is the impact on recent graduates, the young people who will find themselves looking for a job during a frozen economy. The mental and physical health toll on them will be significant. I can't even comprehend how they will feel or what will happen to them. Then there are the social costs. So let's say, for argument's sake, I know it's unfeasible, but let's say for argument's sake that governments around the world, or at least in the countries where the threat of coronavirus is biggest, can continue to fund their citizenry, to fund their people and businesses for 18 months. Let's say they can. So that may help with the economic costs and to an extent the health costs, but that will still leave a lot of the health costs unmet, namely those related to mental health issues. And then there are the social costs. Humans are social beings. Isolate them for a long time and there will be problems. The social structures and institutions we are used to and depend on will be damaged the longer the lockdown is prolonged. There is already a rise in social mistrust, especially as people are worried about who might be a carrier of the virus. The tensions that prolonging the period of social isolation can have, it's significant. It can cause significant negative impact on our social ties and the way we operate as a society. The longer the lockdown continues, the worse the social costs will be. So in light of those massive implications, the benefits of prolonging the coronavirus lockdown doesn't really seem justified. Yes, the lockdown can and will save lives. But the question we should be asking isn't just will it save lives, but rather will it save more lives than it will take in the long term. The matter at hand isn't quite black and white. It's really not as simple as establishing whether the lockdown measures will save lives. What we really need to do to understand the true implications and the long-term true implications of the lockdown measures is understand how it will impact us in the long term. So we need to weigh up the long-term pros and cons rather than just the short-term pros and cons. So here is what I asked myself. Is the long-term cost and drawbacks really worth the short-term benefits of the coronavirus lockdown being prolonged? And the answer is no. I really do not believe so. Based on all the research and evidence I've read, the long-term costs outweigh the short-term benefits. The longer the coronavirus lockdown continues, the worse things will get. There is no point in crying over spilt milk, I understand that, and what's done is done. But it really is about time that governments weigh up the true implications of continuing with the lockdown and come up with better solutions. I'm sure better solutions are possible. Smart people around the world are already working on alternative options, and it can be worth looking into them. Saving lives is absolutely important. I'm not denying that. I'm all for saving lives. But not if it means adopting practices which end up being the catalyst of losing a lot more lives in the long term. That's like saying Saving lives is totally okay, or saving 10 lives is totally okay today, but it will cause the loss of 100 lives in the long term. But the current lockdown practices, unfortunately, is taking us in that direction. So, I'm not asking you to agree with me. If you believe I'm wrong, let me know. Why? What have I missed? What am I not taking into account? I'm always willing to be corrected. So if I'm wrong, let me know. And wherever in the world you are hearing this from, I sincerely hope you and your family are safe, in good health and spirit. One of the key things you can do during challenging times like this is stay positive. If not for your own sake, then at least for the sake of those around you. Remember, there is always light at the end of the tunnel. Things will get better. It's not a matter of if, but rather when. Until then, all we can do is stay calm and do our best. So stay calm and do your best. And as always, thank you for listening. I'll catch up with you next week.